And we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Darian Talks UTSA. We are joined by a good friend of the show, the man, the myth, the legend, JJ Perez is joining us to break down some UTSA football. The best part about all of this stuff is football is back, people. It is. We've been waiting on this for a long time. I've been like struggling all off season to try to find topics to keep people interested and locked into football throughout this time, and now there's no struggle. There's no mystery of what the show is going to be about each week. Now we have football. Now we have what we've all been waiting on back. And of course, we have to pop off the season with JJ joining us. JJ, welcome to the show, man. Good to see you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. Excited. Football's next week, and I don't think people realize Texas State Hate Week is the week after that. So we're rocking and rolling. It's time to roll.
Yeah, dude, we're popping off. It's interesting, man. I think one of the things I've been talking about on the show is like I'm so ready for this Kennesaw State game. Like, obviously on Twitter, there's a lot of banter with Texas State and all of that stuff. Like, that noise is always going to be there. But I'm super intrigued for the Kennesaw State game because we're in a situation where we don't know what the offense is going to look like we did in years past. So I'm so excited and chomping at the bit for that game so I can see what UTSA looks like. But before we jump into some of the questions in the Q&A, I have a few questions of myself. So
let's get to it.
I'm gonna cheat and skip the line. I want to get your overall view on just your overall breakdown on how camp went. You were out there every day. You've seen the guys. You've seen the quarterbacks. You've seen the secondary, which is something that we've talked a lot about. You've seen the receivers. What was camp like for you? What was the experience like?
Yeah, I think they cranked it up a little bit more intense this year than in years past, actually. And I think part of that is they're trying to get through this sluggish September they've always had under Traylor. And I think we saw a little bit of shorter practices, but a little bit more intense practices, a lot more, I don't know what the numbers are, but a lot more padded practices and just really workman-like mentality in fall camp. And I think they got what they wanted to get done. There were some injuries, I think. I don't know that we know the extent of all of those, but I don't know that there were any starters that were dinged up. And to me, the biggest thing is their depth is still intact coming out of camp. And there's another week till football season happens, so they're just trying to get to the game with some of those guys. But I think that, and not shying away from the topic of the college football playoff. I mean, they've gotten some votes in some top 25 polls already. They need to be in it early if they're going to be in it late, right? So I'm a little interested how they play week one. I mean, obviously you don't want to send out kind of everything you're going to do so that you give your opponents film, but they have to almost win convincingly and be attractive in some of these games. So it'll be interesting to see, but those are my biggest takeaways, that, and they're still playing the quarterback thing close to the vest.
Yeah, I want to talk about the quarterback thing for a second because with you being out there, there's a lot of questions about, like, is coach just sort of bluffing this situation? From your perspective, he's talked a lot about both of the guys are getting reps with the ones and, they're splitting in and out. From your perspective, is that true? Were both guys getting reps with the ones and the twos?
Yeah, they're legit splitting the one reps with Eddie Lee and Owen. And, they look like they rotated between, who gets the first rep first, between different series. So they're trying to keep it as fair as possible. Now, practice is closed. That was through camp. Practice is now closed. So we don't get to see anything of that. So that may have changed this week in preparations for next week. But it seems like I bet we see probably maybe a 60-40, 70-30 distribution in week one. I wouldn't be shocked if we saw that. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see. I do think it's a lot closer than people think. I think there's a general consensus that Owen's the guy. I don't know that I disagree with that, but Eddie's made some plays and he's fighting hard. So it's certainly a lot more interesting, I think, than people think.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you say could be 60-40, 70-30 in game one. Here's my take on that. I feel like if we go into the game in that situation, and we are playing both quarterbacks, right, just to get them reps, because coach may not feel like either guy separated themselves.
Right.
I don't know if that is the best approach as we progress throughout the season, right? Because what happens if, let's say, Owen or McCown gets the 60 of that 40, right? What happens if Eddie Lee comes in with his 40% and rips it up, and we have two quarterbacks that are
controversy?
Yeah,
Week one controversy.
Exactly. It's going to split the fan base. It's probably going to split some folks in that locker room. I guess, give me your thoughts on that type of scenario.
Yeah, I mean, really, you have to kind of play both sides of it, right? If you're the coaching staff, you want to keep both of those guys sharp because, let's be honest, you're maybe one injury away. Both guys played good. They had some moments last year. I think the consensus is Owen had better moments, but they also had some really bad moments too, right? Let's be honest. So, it's still going to be a work in progress. And I think really the kind of reading between the lines, and maybe not so much between the lines, I think they're going to be kind of conservative. I think we're going to see a lot of running early on. That was super deep offensive line, a super deep running back room. Man, some really good tight ends. So I think they're not going to rely on whoever the quarterback is, at least early in the season, so that, if it's Owen, he could kind of get his feet under him a little bit.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've liked coming out of just listening to both guys talk, and great job on all the interviews and stuff you've been doing. I've been watching a lot of it. But one of the things that I've really appreciated from both McCown and Eddie Lee is they've embraced the fact that they're in the position battle, and that they are both sort of going to give everything they got, but they're also going to be teammates at the same time. Could you talk a little bit about their interactions throughout camp and how they did support, what support you've seen of them in terms of the way they were interacting together throughout camp?
Yeah, they're legit friends. They're close. I mean, they're right there, taking the mental reps when the other one is taking the actual rep. The banter is there between them, so they're good guys. The kind of one thing that stood out to me.
Oh, the best part, and we lost JJ. Let me 1 second. Let's see if we can get JJ back on. There you go. He's back.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, you're good.
No, the one thing about the quarterbacks and Eddie Lee and Owen is that we've been asking for those interviews kind of since last year, and we got to talk to both of them, and I was kind of interested to hear that Eddie Lee never thought about leaving. He likes UTSA. This is his home. He's got a lot of family and friends here, so I don't know that that's going to be an issue for these two guys because they're both a little different. You look at how the quarterback position is recruited nowadays. UTSA tried to go get a quarterback in the offseason, and they couldn't get guys to come because of money, to be honest with you. That's just the way it is. Like the big time quarterbacks, they have a number and they want to know if they could get it before they even come visit now. So that's one of those things. These two guys are a little bit different. The other guys on the roster are a little bit different. So they got a good group there. And they might have one too many quarterbacks, if you ask me, in that thing. And that's because they haven't recruited two quarterbacks a cycle. You look at, that was the old school way of doing things, and now things are different with the portal. So it's interesting times for sure. I think UTSA is in a good position that they have two guys they could work with, and may the best man win.
Yeah. Last question on the quarterback situation from me, anyway. Or it's not necessarily a question, but I just have a theory, and I'd be curious to get your opinion on what my theory is. And I have to sort of come around to this, but I sort of think it makes sense. I think Coach Traylor's in a situation right now between the two quarterbacks. It's difficult for him to pick a starter because, to the point you made earlier, we've seen both of them play well last season for stretches, but we also seen some areas of improvements that were pretty glaring, right? And the way I look at those and I assess last season, I think we've seen some like I said, we've seen some flashes, we've seen some lowlights, but we didn't really see anything that separated, both of the guys too much, right? Like Eddie Lee does some things very well. McCown does some things very well. They have similarities in terms of their styles, but they also have some pretty clear differences too. So I think it's a situation, at least from my perspective, that he's sort of keeping his cards close to the chest, because what happens if the guy he rolls out there doesn't really play well? You want that guy who's been in that position battle to still feel confident enough that they can get in, have an opportunity to come in and lead the team. And it's sort of, because to me, I think that position battle is probably going to be games 1 and 2. It'll probably stop after Texas State. If somebody is doing really well, and if they get us through game 1 and 2 well, I think they'll continue to be our starting quarterback for the foreseeable future. But I just think that him knowing that the position battle is probably going to go into week 1 and 2 is probably one of the reasons why he's reluctant to announce a starter. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head, because I look back to where they played 4 starters a few years ago. They played 4 different quarterbacks, and you go back to all the interviews, and I think one of the guys ended up leaving after the end of the season, and he gave them each equal praise, right? Like, this person does this does, and what ends up happening is you end up having to need those guys at some point eventually. In that season, he needed them, and one of them ended up leaving anyway. So it's one of those things. It's like you can't praise one without praising the other. And I do think you're right. Like, week 2 is a huge. I mean, it's the game of the year, if you ask me. Because if you lose that game, your shot at college football playoff is over, and it is everything, all hands on deck for that. So it's a early test. I think we find out week 1 who the starter is, to be honest with you, and then that's it. We go from there. But again, you're one snap away. I mean, we could sit here and talk about Owen and like his size and how that. Right. I mean, those are fair questions to ask about his stature, and will he hold up through a whole season? And he hasn't played a full season of D1. I mean, he has had the opportunity, right? But I would point to, how he played at Tennessee, kind of coming off the bench there, as maybe hot as we've ever seen a quarterback play here. So, like you said, definitely flashes. But yeah, it's one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't situations. So,
I agree. I want to move on to the wide receiver position, because there's a lot of talent that we've seen some of that talent displayed in the spring game, but you just look at the guys and where they came from, and even some of their tape from back in the day. I think about what's our guy Devin McEwen from last year, how he blasted on the scene. How did that group develop over the offseason? How did they look in the first couple of weeks of camp for you?
Yeah, I mean, 2 names that I'll throw out there that obviously Sparkman had a big spring game, so he's continued to be a strong presence. But what's the other guy? We just talked about him today, Allen, the other transfer. He's looked good too recently. Yeah, and nobody's really talked about him that much this spring. So I think part of that too is Amador has been battling the hamstring issue. He's been one of the kind of versatile guys they've used in different scenarios, and I expect him to kind of fully be in the mix. But to me, you're talking wide receiver, it starts with McEwen. Like, he's the leader. I think he may be the best player, and that says something, because you still have JT Clark, who's an NFL talent there. So I think, I was kind of shocked to see Chris Carpenter get in a single digit. There was a twist that, maybe that was special teams, but I think he's got a lot of respect in the locker room. He had, a good season 2 years ago and not so much last year. So I think we expect kind of big things from him. And it's just a big group of super, super talented guys.
Yeah, the Chris Carpenter one is one that popped off the list when I seen him get a single digit as well, because I remember going into last season, folks were asking me coming into last season, hey, who do you think is going to be the guy who's going to kind of blast on the scene next year and have a big year? And I said Chris Carpenter, and the season didn't go great for him, but I thought it was interesting that he came back this year, voted a single digit, which shows that he has some respect around the campus. DJ Allen was who you were referring to. I was going to ask about him specifically because I hadn't heard a
Right.
lot about him. So I'm glad that you brought him up, and I'm glad to hear that he's doing well. Um, just a question on JT Clark. Did he practice at all during that time, or was it
No,
just
no, he's been down since last year. I think he didn't he didn't kind of want to say it, but it sounds like there were um, maybe they didn't do his surgery right the first time, or we don't have all the details. You hear certain stuff, and you can't report everything you hear because you don't know what's true or what's not. But that may have not been kind of the only player that went through something like that where they had to get a surgery redone. So he took kind of the high road by talking about it. He got, I want to say it was in January, he
yeah?
had another surgery. So the timetable is 10 months, right? 8 to 10 months. So we're right in that window. And it's just going to be a matter of how he comes back. And I remember seeing him this time last year, and he looked good running vertical stuff, but the cuts and the change of directions looked a little. So he hasn't even done that this year, to be honest with you. He's just been out there doing a lot of cardio stuff. So I think the hope is to try and get him back for conference play. We'll see. Um, I don't know that they rushed him back too soon last year, as much as they kind of just, it was an unfortunate situation. So I do think we still see more JT Clark this year for the Roadrunners, though, and which would be great for him because, I mean, he's a perennial third-round draft pick by many, many experts.
Right. Yeah. And I tell people all the time because there's always a lot of questions about him. I mean, you've been around the game for a long time as well. At some point, it comes to a time to where you just want to see a guy healthy and be able to walk around and do normal everyday life stuff without pain. And there's a lot of my friends that I talk to on the daily that have constant pain. I still sleep and have pain in my shoulders literally every morning. That is not a joke. And that came from the sublux shoulder situation I have in both that I carried from high school all the way through college and things like that. And it still bothers me to this day because I refuse to have surgery. But I think about JT Clark, and I just say, man, I hope that he's in a situation where he's just not walking around in pain all day because
Yeah.
that really sucks. I want to talk about the running backs briefly because it's the most surefire position I think maybe on the whole team, but especially on
Yeah.
the offense because we got three guys who are really proven. Kavorian Barnes to me is very interesting because I sort of pointed it out last year, and I think one of the I think maybe you were reported that he had a shoulder injury, so it kept him from he got a little heavy, and I noticed that last year. I was like, man, something is different with him because the year prior, whenever he hit a seam, it was a wrap.
Yeah.
Nobody was. And I would say last year he was a lot less mobile and a lot less, a lot less fast on some of those breakaway plays.
Yeah.
Talk about him and how he's transformed his body, got himself into a good position. How did he look in camp to you?
Yeah, I mean, he looks as good as I think we've ever seen him, which is it's like that. You go back to his true freshman year or his freshman season, and man, he was a beast. And I think we see a version of that now. Does he stay healthy? That's the running style that he has. It's very abusive. And you mentioned the injuries. This game doesn't play. Like, it is a brutal, brutal game. It doesn't care who you are. So it'll be interesting to see how much UTSA uses him early, to be honest with you, just so that I think maybe they save him for the long run of the season. Because, I do think there's talent there. I'm going to go on record. You look at my depth chart projection. I think Robert Henry might be the best running back on this team, and right behind him, another name I'm going to give you that's going to be shocking is Brandon High. And
Really?
I mean, yeah, he is super, super talented. So that to say nothing about the rest of the guys on the roster who are also really good. I mean, I saw the kid from Gilmer. I mean, he's fast. Like, he's crazy fast. Like, I don't know how you keep that off the field. So we'll see how they manage it, split the reps. But I think we do see a slimmer kind of Kavorian Barnes. And I do think they maybe limit his touches to try and, spread things out a little bit to see what the other guys could do.
Yeah, it's one thing that's first off, it's very interesting hearing about Brendan High. I hadn't heard much about him, but it's great to hear about him. You're talking about Tomahawk, the guy from Gilmer.
Yeah.
I have a question about him because some of the folks were. I mean, you look at his 100 time, and I'm like, yo, that they don't make that type of speed everywhere. Somebody mixed some ingredients in a pot and created that guy. And someone said, like, what are the chances of us seeing him play at all? And I was like, listen, I don't think that a guy like that, considering the stable of running backs that we have, I don't imagine that he get a large opportunity, but you never know with injuries. Yep. But to me, someone with that speed, or do they have him catching kick returns or punts at all? Like, I feel like they got to get him a jet sweep or something, because you got to think, if that dude gets a seam and a lane, it is house call.
Yep, just get him the ball in space. It's the same thing with David Amador, the wide receiver. I mean, the versatility, the speed, kind of just the headiness of it. You give those guys a shot, and you look at what Amador did last year. I don't think anybody expected him to come in and be that as a true freshman. So I wouldn't put it past him. I mean, you got 4 games before you burn your red shirt. I don't think that includes the bowl game, right? So, because conceivably he could get out there for 5 games this year, and I do think we could see him, because look, you talk about the big 3 running backs, right? And they're very good. They're stacked there, but I do think all 3 of them were battling injuries at various points of last season. And I go back to the bowl game, whenever it was 2 years ago in Florida, and I don't think they had one healthy running back in that game. So it's a situation where you're going to come to the end of the season. I think you have 2 back-to-back Friday games. So you got 2 short weeks back-to-back. If you're in the championship game, that's another Friday game. And then, you might have a bowl game in 10 days after that. So yeah, it's just, you gotta keep every option available. And I don't think there are any guys who are kind of, these guys are off limits to play this year.
That's good to hear. I was just thinking about, like, if there's something we can do to get that dude, I just want to see him run.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to see him run, even if it's a couple times in the game. Really quick on the offensive line, anybody stand out? I know that's a position where we have some good depth and we need depth in that position. Anybody stand out? I know there was a lot of talk about CJ James, but anybody else stand out to you?
Yeah, for sure. For me, CJ James is the undisputed leader of this offensive line. He's gonna be the starting center, and he's good. He's going to be an all-conference type player. To me, the biggest thing is the upgrade at tackle, right? Like, you had guys there playing out of position last year. You had walk-ons. You had converted defensive linemen there. Now you have depth. Like, you look at the measurables of the tackles on the roster. Those are real Division I tackles. Like, no disrespect to the guys that were there last year and the year before, but like, they had Vinley playing out of position at tackle last year. So the 2 guys I expect to start are Jalen Garth, the Houston transfer, and Kamar Missouri. I think those are your bookend tackles. I do think we'll see a little bit of Mekhi Hart if and when he's healthy. He's a all-conference talent if he's healthy. I don't know that he's 100% right now, but it sounds like he'll get there. And yeah, they got a couple of guys behind those guys that are they're deep. They're legit big body deep. So, it's only a matter of time before those guys face injuries. So you got to have bodies, but this is probably the biggest, deepest, most talented offensive line we've ever seen at UTSA. And to me, that's maybe the most exciting aspect about this football team.
Yeah, and that's super important, considering the fact that we're ushering in new quarterbacks. So
yeah, for sure,
to be able to protect their backside and that sort of thing. I want to transition to the defensive side of the ball. And guys, I will get to your questions at the end. If you want to have something jump the line and be priority, send in a super chat, or if you're a member, I'll prioritize yours too. But I want to jump on the defensive side of the ball, JJ, and I want to start with the secondary. So I'm gonna go like secondary in, and there's just a lot of questions about the secondary because there's a lot of new guys. There's a few guys that have some history there already. There's the guys that I've been hearing about all summer just from folks around the program, and a few of those guys got single digits. So I'm assuming that they're going to be guys that we're going to see. So over the summer, I heard a lot about Zy Frazier and how good he's going to be. Somebody told me that they expect him to be like potential all conference type guy if he realizes his potential, considering how he can make plays. And then with Elliot Davidson and Ken Robinson, or guys who already have experience. We've seen Elliot Davidson make some plays last year. I remember him making that interception in the end zone. I forget what game it was, but he had a nice pick then. Anything in the secondary? Well, also before I get into that, there's just been a lot of talk. People want to see Denver Harris and what he's going to be, considering all of the high praise he has and things like that coming in. So secondary, what was your take on their performance in camp from your perspective, and who stood out to you the most?
So that Coach Traylor made a point of emphasis to feel like that was kind of an area that needed to answer some questions in fall camp, and I think they did, to be quite frank with you. Zay Frazier's probably going to be the starter opposite Zach Morris. So that's, the transfer from New Mexico, which some people are going to hear that and kind of be surprised that, Denver Harris is back there. The other name of the person out there is Cyrus Dumas. So to me, those are your top 4 cornerbacks. And I say those are the top 2, but they're probably going to end up splitting the reps anyway between those 4 guys, because they want to play those 4 guys and get them. So that those 4 guys are going to take the lion's share of it. I think they're waiting for Denver to kind of become a leader in that room. We haven't talked to him yet. We ask for him literally every day. So hopefully that interview's coming and we'll get to learn a little bit more about his story. But from everything we're hearing, like, he's doing great off the field. He's an NFL talent if he puts it all together. And I do think that's a special talent. And we'll see. We'll see how that position looks once the season gets going, but there is a lot of talent. Like, I really like what I've seen from Zach Morris and Zay Frazier. But one thing I will mention to you, since you brought up the single digits, one thing that I heard is that UTSA voted on these digits a week earlier than they usually do. So maybe some of these guys who were voted in may not have gotten voted in a week later, right? And so I feel like that hurts maybe some of the newer guys, that some of the transfers. So, but I mean, it's a good group. I like it. I wasn't real surprised about all the single digits, but I just wanted to throw that out there because you have a guy like one of the safety guys, or like JJ Sparkman, maybe he could have maybe got in single digits. So it's one of those things where it's just the timing is a little different this year. So.
Yeah, that's a really good context to know, because I feel like that also tells a story about the type of summer those guys had, right? Coming into camp. So, it's really hard to vote on the first week of camp because everybody's knocking the rust off. Where, you're probably not even hitting very much at that particular point in time. So yeah, that's really good context to consider in this. On the with the safeties, is Elliot Davidson and Ken Robinson, are they kind of your surefire starters at safety? What about the guy from Stanford, Jimmy Ward?
Yeah.
And I know Jamarius Lewis is there too. I see him on your depth. How did those
those are my 4 guys right there. You said it all. I think Davison and Robinson are the consensus leaders back there. They're single digits. They were, I think, voted in by a large margin. So I think Robinson may have been battling some kind of nicked up injury. So who knows how much we see him early in the season, but really, really like Wyrick, the transfer from Stanford. So I've seen good things from him. He looks to be like a smart, heady person type of player. And then Jamarius Lewis, he's a playmaker. So a good group there. I thought maybe that position, talent-wise, the last few years may have been a little thin, and they legit have four guys that could go in and start now. So we'll see how that works with the leadership role, right? Like Rashad Wisdom's a big leader to fill. I think Ken Robinson steps into that role. I think he already has, to be honest with you. He may be the leader of the whole defense. So we'll see how that continues to show this season.
Well, I think you make a good point there about we've been sort of thin in that position. And I think Rashad Wisdom has a lot to do with that, right? Somebody that's been a staple safety for us for so long, playing as a freshman and being as a big impact player for all those years. It's going to, push some younger safeties or some transfers sort of away because you're not you already know you're not coming in and you're going to play over that guy, right? So
Yeah.
now you're seeing more guys, with him leaving, there's going to be other guys that's going to look at it and say, hey, there's an opportunity that we can get on the field. I think one thing that's also interesting about some of this too is especially as we go to the linebacker position, because I'm looking at who you have, the top two inside linebackers, and I see Brevin Randall transfer in that position that you have on your depth chart here. And I look at some of the other guys like Kendrick Blackshire, the transfer from Alabama. We got Ian Jackson from Alabama as well. Or is Blackshire from Texas? Is he from Texas or Alabama?
Texas, yeah.
Texas, there you go.
Yeah.
Ian Jackson is Alabama.
Yeah.
Martavius French. So anyway, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on the linebacker position, how those transfers looked. They look like we've been seeing the videos. They are physically imposing.
Yeah, it's night and day, to be honest with you. I mean,
Really?
I think Brevin Randall may be the most rounded of the linebacker group next to Jamal, but man, you look at Blackshire and he's scary. Like, he's fast, he's huge. Like, he ran up us on a run play. He ran by us, and it's like, man, who is this guy? Like, he's legit, like a big time D1 linebacker. So I think eventually he may step into that starter role. I just think Brevin's a little bit more rounded. Martavius French is still on the roster, and he may come back some point this season. So I do think he'll play a role on this team if he does come back. So a super, super stacked. I mean, Ian Jackson is kind of maybe the last man down at the totem pole there, and it's like, hey, he's got talent too. So a super, super stacked room. Obviously, the leader there is Jamal Liggin. I mean, he's gonna end up being the all-time leading tackler in UTSA history, and it's probably not even going to be close because he's played so many snaps for UTSA. Knock on wood, he doesn't get hurt. But the depth there, the linebacker group used to be one of the least deepest parts of the team, and you can make the argument now that it is the deepest part of the team. So exciting to see how those guys, shake out.
That's important because we need fresh legs there, right? Like, you always need fresh legs. There's going to be a team. I mean, we play teams that's going to spread us out all the time. And I think one of the qualities that people sort of undervalue because they are not as how can I explain it? They aren't like, if a play breaks down and it's the linebacker's fault, it is hard for people watching casually to see that it's the linebacker's fault.
Right.
And it's kind of a double-edged sword for them, right? Because whenever they make a lot of plays, unless it's like an interception or something, people don't see that this guy may have had 14 tackles throughout of a game, right? But like, so they have like the non-sexy position. So like talent and things like that can get overlooked, especially whenever you think about how good those guys have to be in coverage. Especially in a conference like ours, you have to be, versatility is a must at that position, and guys being able to do different things. So could you talk a little bit about the difference in styles and what some of those guys bring differently to the table? I think there are some guys who are going to be more run stoppers. There's some guys who are going to be better dropping in coverage. Did you get a sense of that from any of those?
I think Brevin Randall, like I mentioned, is the most versatile guy. I think you put him next to Jamal Liggin, and there's some good chemistry there, right? They're able to play off each other. And what does Jamal do well? Like, he's going to be the guy with probably the microphone in his helmet. They have microphones now, starting this year, so he's going to be like the quarterback of the defense, and Brevin's going to be right next to him. So I think those two guys are your dynamic duo, and Blackshire and Jackson are just physical freaks, to be honest with you. Like, they are physical specimens that they're going to stop the ball. I don't know how good they are in pass coverage, right? That could be something that they're going to have to develop into, or you scheme around it, right? Like you go nickel coverage, or you do different stuff. So, and I think Martavius French is kind of like a tweener guy. Like, he does a little bit of both of those things well, maybe not as good as some of the others. So eventually I think they use all five of those guys, if I'm being honest, this season, because it's just somebody's going to get banged up, or you never know what's going to happen. And I do think that is a super, super solid. Like, they went out and recruited those guys, and it's because they have a new linebackers coach, because he has come in here and they have done well for themselves. So it's a huge upgrade. They deserve a lot of credit for that. We'll see how it pays dividends on the field.
Nice. I want to move on to the pass rushers and the run stoppers in the middle. Our front seven, there's just been a lot of talk about, they're going to be the heart of our defense. That's the one area on the defense that people aren't so worried about, right? Talked about Jamal Liggett and all the transfers we got. And then when you look on our defensive line, and I know we lost, people still talk about Trey Moore last year, but I'll tell people, like, UTSA has consistently throughout the years have always had a good defensive line. I mean, I'm talking about dating back to my years where we had, I'm thinking about, Jason Neals back in the day. You had Marlon Smiths. You had, I'm going way, way back, right?
Yeah,
but I think about that time, like, as time went on, we've had Ashad Mabry's, these guys who have had NFL opportunities and things like that. So we've always had great folks on the defensive line. But now we have Joe Evans, Brandon Brown, and a lot of those guys. Talk to me about the pass rushers. I didn't even mention Jamori Robinson. Talk to me about the pass rushers and how they looked throughout camp.
Yeah, to me, it starts at that kind of that edge rush position, right? Like what Trey Moore did the last few seasons, it's remarkable, right? But people forget before him, you had Clarence Hicks at that position a few seasons, and he put up equally great numbers. So who were those guys before they stepped into those roles, right? They weren't big, heavily recruited guys. Like Trey Moore was a late add, I think, in the summer of his first season. So you have to just find the next guy, right? The next diamond in the rough. I do think Jamori is probably the most talented guy they may have had there. Just you look at his pedigree, his offers out of high school and JUCO, and he seems poised to take that next step. Now, I don't think it's fair to put those kind of expectations on him, but really, he's the guy that is going to have to do it, because behind them, they don't have a lot of depth. I think there was a summer injury to Nana Anawu. So they have a couple of young guys behind Jamori. And then really the defensive ends, they're going to be, big contributors to this too. Two names that are going to be, pretty active in my book are Joe Evans. We all know he has NFL aspirations, and SMU transfer Damian Wimberly.
I'm going to ask you about him.
Yeah, so those guys they look like they're going to be playmakers for this team. They look like they're going to be run stoppers. They look like they're going to be able to get to the quarterback. So those are the guys I have my eye on. Obviously, I think one of the things I haven't seen the last few weeks is Johnny Bowens. I haven't seen him on the field. I think there's an injury situation. I left him off my depth chart. It sounds like it's a serious injury. We don't know. I'm trying to get more information and, gather a report on that. But even if he wasn't, I don't know, he just got here, right? Like, how could you expect him to come in and be a big-time contributor? But obviously still a talent there. Coach Traylor mentioned today that this defensive line group had, a few injuries that they took through camp. So as a whole, I don't know if they're as deep, like 1 through 9 or 1 through 10 as they've been in years past, but I would say their top 6 or 7 are as good as anybody in G5. And you look at Brandon Brown and Joe Evans and Jamori Robinson, those guys have all conference talent. And that is, to me, the heart and soul of the UTSA defense right there.
Yeah, and those 3 guys will probably get some looks on Sundays as well. So we went through the whole defense, and I want to sort of bring this home before we get to the questions in the chat. Now, with all of that, you've watched camp, so you have a inside eye, of what we're going to look like next year, at least a little bit, right? You have a little bit more, like you don't have as many questions as some of us who hadn't been to camp.
Right.
How far do you think UTSA can actually go? Like, is it possible, this college football playoff thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think a New Year's 6 was possible the last 2 years, right? Like look back at their hiccups, right? Like what happens against Houston the last 2 years, right? I mean, if Frank Schroeder doesn't go bad against Tulane, maybe UTSA is the SMU of last year who's getting snubbed. Who knows? Who knows how things play out? I do think the talent is there. I do think a lot of it is going to be, to me, I have 4 games circled on my calendar. I have Texas State, East Carolina, Memphis, and Army.
Yeah.
Those are the 4 big ones. Those are the 4 games of the year on my calendar, and I mean, you can't lose them, and you probably have to win them convincingly, because I think a lot of people feel like Texas State is a trendy pick for that spot. I would say it's more likely that Liberty holds that kind of position for most of the year because of their schedule and who they play. So it's going to be an uphill challenge the entire way, but I do think, the Roadrunners are in a good spot. I do think they maybe have to sell themselves a little more, right? Like they haven't been shying away from the talk about this is out there, it's a goal, but maybe it's they need to come out and say they deserve it a little bit more than some of the other teams. And I do think we may see some of that as the season goes on. But listen, you get into a good showing the first 2 weeks, you play decent against Texas, you have a 3-1 non-conference schedule, and you start conference off strong, and you're going to be in conversations the rest of the way there. So I do not think like people talk about it, but like this is the upper echelon of college football, right? Like this is the instant climb up the mountain that UTSA's kind of been waiting to do. So it is an absolutely mammoth opportunity that they have, and it'll just be a matter of sidestepping those 4 games and getting over the mountain there. Because I'll tell you what, I'm not joking. This is the maybe scariest Texas State team I think UTSA has faced in the tenure. So that game's going to be a dogfight for sure.
Yeah, I am trying not to put so much energy into that game, but how can you not? It's like it's one of those situations where, I mean, I don't like to call it make or break, but it is, all of, and I mean, even for Texas State as well. Like if you think about it, they're in the same position because, to your point, they're a trendy pick to pick for that college football playoff spot, and they're going to be looking at that game the same way we're going to be looking at that game. And if you think about dating back to last year, our game against Texas State was, more competitive than we would like it to be. Right. And they are probably going to be better this year. We are losing our starting quarterback and ushering in a new starting quarterback. So it's going to be interesting. I'm still rolling with UTSA, but it's going to be an interesting. I'll be a lot more nervous for that game than I have been in years past. In terms of the season, though, UTSA over under 9 games.
Oof. That's a good number. That is a good number. I like the over. I mean, I don't. Yeah, I mean, you look at the schedule. They're probably going to be favored in mostly all of these games, right? Except for Texas, maybe. Like, let's be honest. So it's just how do they handle whatever? I mean, last time they played Texas, they played Texas. I think they had 18 injuries the next week. So, like, how do you manage that? And I think the schedule actually breaks good for them. There's 2 bye weeks. There's a bye before the conference opener. I don't like those Friday games, but they're spaced out to where, it's equal amount for both sides. So, I like the over. I think this is a team that's in the mix for the conference championship, and, they could play. We're talking about the college football playoff, right? Like that's the ultimate goal, and it is, right? But you have to win a conference championship first, right? Like you're not gonna, you still have to get there. So even if that doesn't happen, you still have that goal out there, and you still get to go to a good bowl game and have a really good season. So you just kind of have to take a look at it. If UTSA has a 10-win season, heck, if it's 8 wins, right? Those are amazing seasons. So I do think the stars may align this year, though, for it to be, one of the true special ones.
Right. Okay, I want to jump into some of the questions we have in the chat. Sorry, chat. I did not expect to take 45 minutes, but with my questions. But I had to. I had too many questions to ask JJ here. So I'm not gonna go through every single question, y'all. I'm just gonna go through some of the ones. I'm gonna try to hit stuff that JJ and I did not talk about already. I don't know if this is one. I'm just gonna try and see if it is. I'm working on getting a moderator. Me and Kermit are talking. So like I'm gonna have a moderator going forward for this season because I'm gonna need one. Let's see. Coach still refuses to name a starting quarterback and confirm both will play Saturday. Did he? I'm convinced also that we will see most vanilla offense defense against Texas State. So so Texas State won't have film. Thoughts?
Yeah, 100%. It's gamemanship, right? You're going to make Texas State prepare for both guys.
Yep, 100%. Let me go through a few more of these. They're asking about the uniforms. Do you think the black alternate uniforms will be worn for game one or multiple?
I think they have a blackout date on the calendar, so I think hey, if they win that game, I think is that Memphis, right? They may wear them the rest of the year. Who knows?
Let's see. Ivan says, JJ, woohoo. Yes, we love to have JJ on. He says, please tell me Traylor won't have a 2-quarterback system. His comment to your question sounded like he was okay with switching positions often, including quarterback.
No, I don't think he's going to roll that way. I just think he's a little gamemanship. That's all it is.
Okay. Marcus says, why didn't we go with the come and take it star and cannon with the black and white unis? I know the university wants to move away from that, but there's still a giant sign in the race center for it or with it. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I love to come and take it. A lot of people do. I walk by that sign every day. It's still there. So I don't know. That's a good question for the president and administration. Let's bring it back. I'm with you guys.
Let's see. Eric says, what's another position outside of quarterback what's outside of the quarterback spot do you think we should look forward to?
You know what? We didn't talk about tight ends, and that is another deep group. I mean, you talk about Oscar, right? He lost all this weight. He looks a shell of himself. Like he's not the same Oscar, right? He's still a good blocker. He's faster. He's got good hands, but man, they got some young guys. Houston Thomas, I think, may be the best tight end on the roster, and Patrick Overmeyer may be right behind him. So you still have Dan Dishman there too, who they love because he's a great versatile player. So I think we see a lot of multiple tight end set, and I circle the tight ends because they're gonna do some stuff I think with them this year.
Yeah. I can't believe I forgot a tight end spot because I really like one of the guys we got that committed. He's like a super
Yep.
He's going to be a problem when he gets here. Let's see. Ivan says, yes, I do have a fantasy football league that I am going to commission. I haven't commissioned in like 8 years, but I'm going to step back and put my commission hat on. I will just reply to that post on Twitter. I'm going to follow everybody and send you guys DMs so you can get signed up and stuff like that so I can send you the invite. So just if you could do that for me, Ivan, that would be super helpful. Let's see. LRX13 says, is there any viewpoints in terms of what we should expect this season or maybe coaching decisions made that we know of that you and JJ disagree on? I don't know. I think it's too early. We'll try to get JJ on after a few games this season, and I'm sure there'll be things that's happened that we disagree on at that point. Let's see. Have you heard of any injuries to starters that could prevent them from playing the season opener?
Yeah, I just think the two biggest names there are Mekhi Hart and JT Clark, right? Though I don't know that they suffered injuries, that they're just recovering from them still. The other guys we talked about, those are guys that were like backups, right? Maybe in the 2 deep. So significant, right? But not starter significant. So hopefully, fingers crossed, they make it to game one. We'll find out when they hit the field for warmups.
100%. Let's see. I'm rolling. Oh, we got a question. I didn't go into special teams. Talk about the kickers, if you can.
Yeah, so we don't get to watch a lot of special teams. They keep that kind of G14 classified. They close that. But the punter is solid. Like I see him boom stuff all the time. He's an Australian punter. He got some crazy English on his ball, and I think Chase Allen is going to be the place kicker, and he's He's a Jet. I think they're wanting more consistency from him, right? He was kind of hit and miss last year. So they got, and I think there's another guy in there too. So, yeah, lots of depth there too. So I think they're going to be okay. I will be interested to see what they do with the returners, right? Because that's something we don't get to see. So I do think we'll see maybe Kavorian back there doing some of that as well.
You think Kavorian would be?
Yeah, yeah.
Really interesting. Yeah. I hope they. One of the things that I want to, and I'm sorry, chat, but I'm cutting the line again. One of the things I heard Coach Traylor talk about, and he talked about it more in the spring, but he talked about the different profile of receiver that we have now, and we have a lot of guys who are straight line fast. And not even just at the receiver position, but I mean, you look at Tomahawk who comes in. He's a running back that's straight line fast.
Yeah.
And he also talked about like the playbook isn't really changing. It's just going to be more. He said, I think one of the things he said was like the frequency of certain plays are going to decrease and increase based on the talent and the players that we have now, and it's going to adjust to the personnel. Did you see us working on taking more shots downfield? Because that's something I've been calling for. Because like, if you just think about Traylor offenses, right? Like he's very much RPO. We're gonna run the football. We're gonna
take and dunk.
Yeah, dink and dunk. We're not gonna do too much, but like I feel like I used to want us to stretch the field more because I used to feel like you can kind of predict when we're gonna take a shot. Because
I think they're still trying to figure that out, right? Because obviously they're not going to be as RPO heavy. I don't think. I just think you could expect that. But they still want to do inside run, right? They have those tackles. They have a big offensive line. So, and then I do think we're going to see a lot of tight end play. Yeah. Like there's no way around it. So I do think we'll see measured shots down the field. Man, they got some speedsters. I'm telling you, Amador is legit versatile, and some of these new guys. We can talk about Chris Carpenter. Chris Carpenter. I mean, he's the guy and McEwen. So yeah, I would expect a mix maybe. I wouldn't say it's going to increase or decrease. I'd say it's probably going to be about the same.
Right. This one is right for you. Anthony says, JJ, what is your predicted timeline on when Coach finally gets his covered practice field?
I'll throw it out there. I don't think we see it. I don't know.
You don't?
I could be wrong. There are a lot of needs the athletic department has, right? And now they got to figure out NIL. Like they have to. Yeah. They have to get into NIL and revenue sharing, and they're doing stuff with a nutrition center. I think they want to do softball and something else for. I don't know. She told me the list of projects, and I think she didn't mean to say in order, but that's the way I understand it, because I don't understand why they didn't build the practice facility, the cover, when they built the facility. Right. But there's limits, right? There's dollar limits, and the infrastructure is there. It's just every year they don't do it. It costs more, and I don't think there's ever going to be one person that's going to be able to step up and pay for that thing. So it's maybe the Tariq Woolen indoor practice facility when he gets a second contract. I don't know. Who knows? But we'll see. We'll see. Next guy in the NFL. We got to get these guys to the NFL. If you guys win the lottery, we'll put your name on it. Who knows?
100%. Yeah. Well, the thing about the practice facility that I heard, that the price went up from, I think there was a quote, I think 2 or 3 years ago. And from that time, it is tripled, or maybe even more than tripled, from that price to the price that it would take to do it now. And that is some of what's causing some of the complications with it getting done. Is that sort of your read?
Yeah.
On it also?
Yeah. I mean, they couldn't afford it when it was whatever $3 or $4 or $5 million, right? Now, who
it's like 11?
How can they afford it if it's 10 or 12, right? I mean, that's common sense. I couldn't afford it, right? So I'm not calling out the administration. I go out there, it's hot. Like every day I go out there, it's like, man, I could use a cover. It'd be awesome, right? But hey, it is what it is. It's a great facility, more than UTSA's ever had before. But until they get kind of big time funding or a big time donation to kind of spearhead that, I don't see it happening. And I think there's just too many other needs right now the department has.
Right. Okay. We're gonna end on this one because I have a question that sort of goes in line with this one. He says, "Who have you seen as the playmaker?" This is Jeffrey, and he says, "Who's that third and short go-to guy that we'd expect to see that's going to pick up some clutch yardage?"
Yeah, I'm looking at the tight ends, right? I'm looking at Oscar Carnes. I'm looking at Houston Thomas. I mean, Coach Traylor said he had a touchdown play for Patrick Overmeyer in the bowl game, and he didn't want to call it because he didn't want him to go to the portal. Those are talented guys. Like, they're big, they're strong, they're fast, they have great hands, they're good blockers.
Right.
And that's nothing to say. You got all these speedy wide receivers. Like, man, I wouldn't be shocked if we see Amador take a sweep and throw the ball this year, right? Because he's a former quarterback. So, yeah, those are the guys I'd have my eye on third and short for sure.
Yeah, and the follow up to that question is Oscar. So that's one of the guys, one of the main players that we didn't talk about. And one of the big things with him, obviously, he's been here longer than Traylor, I think. And I think he's the only guy that's outstayed or been here longer than Traylor. And I know he dropped a lot of weight in preparation for the season to try to increase his chances to play on the next level. How has he looked with his new frame, in camp? Was he moving around pretty well? How was he looking out there?
Yeah, no, he looks fast. He looks trimmed. He looks super slim. I think they have him also on all the special teams, right? So he gets in there. He moves around. So, yeah, I mean, just improving his stock, right? He was kind of big as a tight end. Let's be honest, he might have been a tackle playing tight end last year, right? The last 2 years. So that was the decision. I think he almost didn't come back this year.
Really?
But I don't think he wanted to be an offensive tackle. I think he wanted to be a tight end to try and give it a go. So, hopefully he has a good year. That's the motivation for most of these guys, right? You try to get your stock up, you have a good pro day, and then now there's more opportunities now than ever to play at the next level, right? Like, you get in front of scouts. There's scouts there every day, and it used to be, a scout a few times every other week or something, and just the opportunity is there. Like, you could really get there from UTSA, and these guys have legit, facilities and legit strength coaches, like just high number, more than ever before. And they're right up there with everybody else. So it's just a matter, like, you look at what Tariq and Spencer and all these guys in the NFL have done. They've come from maybe worse places than where UTSA is at now, right?
Yeah.
So all these guys can make it. So that's the goal. Like, that's what they're working for, in addition to, like, the team success, right? So I hope he has a great season. I feel like he was always under targeted a little bit the last year or two. So I think maybe, tight end use is going to be uptick this year. And I think he may benefit from that.
Yeah. And you know what? I think that's I always kind of thought about that too, is that, like, I feel like he's good enough to get more targets.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do understand it's tough to get a guy that big the ball a lot, and it's tough to really involve him in the offense, because I don't know, there's things you worry about, like with him doing it. I think him slimming down is going to make him a more versatile target. They're going to probably put him in, he's not going to run the same outs and things like that. You're going to send him on maybe some more corners now. He may get a post here and there or something like that.
How does that affect his blocking, right? Like,
right,
what is that? Yeah.
It's a great point. Yeah, 100%. But yeah, dude, I am so pumped for the season. I really, really appreciate you for coming on. I know I'm just looking at some of the comments in the. I'll tell you this: if you can, whenever you go back and you go through it live, you'll have a huge ego boost looking at all the love you've gotten.
I appreciate it, man. I'm just a guy that gets to go to practice a lot. So I appreciate you having me on. Hopefully we could do this again during the season, maybe one of the bye weeks or something. We could circle back and see where the team looks. But yeah, no, I also want to give you a shout out, right? I see you grinding here on your channel here. You got a pretty good following. So, hopefully the fans kind of could see what's going on here. I think we got a good community of Roadrunner people, right? Like, everybody is excited. They want to see the Roadrunners play well, do well. And I think, man, every year I say this, it feels like, is this the most exciting Roadrunner season ever, right? Like, it couldn't be. And it's like every year we've been in this, it's the same thing. And it keeps getting better. And really, like, I mean, you look at what UTSA has compared to some other places, there really is no ceiling for where this program could go. So I'm excited. I appreciate I try to listen to all your live stuff because it gives me an opportunity to kind of hear what the fans are saying and, maybe think of questions that I don't necessarily think of or things. So, you keep doing the things you're doing and hopefully, the fans respond. So I appreciate you having me on.
Of course, man. We'll do this again mid-season on one of the bye weeks because we definitely want to check in again. But like I said, man, appreciate you, JJ. Appreciate the kind words as well, man. We're going to keep doing this thing, and it's go time, baby. UTSA football's back. Peace out. See you guys.